Welcome everyone. Thanks a lot for staying with us. You're watching Plain Speak with me, Shivani Gupta. India is all set for this G20 Leaders Summit 2023. And what a show the country has put up. Joe Biden, US President, has just landed, as the visuals on your screen show. We're of course on standby for the President of United States to make an exit from the aircraft. And of course, he'll be heading straight to the Prime Minister's residence for his bilateral with the Indian Prime Minister. The centerpiece of the G20 Bharat Mandapam is abuzz with a lot of activity all through the day today, as it will be for the next 2 days, with all of these global leaders touching down. The Prime Minister, as I said, is set to host a number of bilaterals, including the very important one with his US counterpart. From over 200 programs in over 60 cities of the country, this G20 presidency has been called the People's Presidency by the government. And by now, it will culminate in the national capital, and the city is all decked up. But more importantly, everything is functioning according to a plan. It is working like clockwork. Dignitaries are being wowed, and India's image is being boosted in the eyes of the world. From the tagline of Vasudev Kutumbakam to the 8.5-meter statue of Nataraj, the cosmic dancer form of Lord Shiva, at the entrance of the G20 summit venue, this is also about showcasing India's roots. The manner in which the presidency was celebrated and implemented all across the country makes this a G20 presidency akin to a festival for India. So has the government really managed to put up the greatest international show ever in the country? We'll of course get a lot of our guests to respond to that, but let's keep our focus on these visuals that are coming in from the national capital. Air Force One carrying the US Prime Minister Joe Biden touching down in the national capital. Let me also go across to my colleagues Abhishek Jha and Siddhant, who've been tracking a lot of the G20 activity. Abhishek, coming to you first up. Lots on the agenda for the premiers of US and India as they get set for a bilateral in just about an hour's time from now. And this is going to be a continuation of the friendship that was strengthened during the Prime Minister's visit to the US last.
Of course, and in as many as last 4 months, I think this is the third time that the two leaders will be having a bilateral conversation. Prime Minister Modi had a chance to meet him in Japan during G7 summit level talks. Then the Prime Minister had traveled to White House, where he was invited as a state guest, an official state guest, and the Biden family has invited him over dinner in White House. And now President Biden himself is in Delhi, where he will be having most likely the meeting a few minutes from now, because 7:45 p.m. is likely the time when the two leaders will be meeting and discussing the bilateral ties, and where they had whatever they had discussed during the June summit level talks, how to progress with that. We have seen India-US bilateral ties in all encompassing in the areas from strategic ties to defense sector, to climate change, people-to-people engagement, education policies, collaboration in research and technology, space collaboration, cyber security, critical and emerging technologies. And we have seen multiple visits also from both sides happening. We have seen NSA Doval traveling to USA, US National Secretary Advisor, he is traveling back to India. And there have been 2+2, joint talk, strategic level dialogue also, where the Foreign Minister of India and Defense Minister of India joins their US counterpart in discussing how India-US collaboration can achieve its goal in strategic areas. So there is a deep, trusted ties where both countries are looking for a long roadmap ahead.
Absolutely.
And this visit of Biden will cement
and the US administration has absolutely focused on that. Ahead of the Prime Minister, the President's touching down in the national capital, the US administration of Joe Biden has made it very clear that this is a very important partnership for them. This has always been a long-term strategic partnership for them, but based on common values. And this is something that will be the focus for the US President as he comes to the national capital, even though he's of course coming for the G20 heads of state meeting. Let me also go across to Siddhant. Siddhant, the city, you've been tracking it, has been geared up and is functioning beautifully as all of these big heads of state arrive in the capital, and possibly the biggest of them is now touching down.
That's right, Shivani. In fact, behind me you can see this magnificent Bharat Mandapam, and this entire arena complex is decked up, full of lights, colors, laser shows happening, and behind me, I cannot establish that from my camera for our viewers, but the rehearsals are also going on, that how the convoys of heads of states will enter the premises and how they will depart from the premises. So the rehearsals were going on just a short while back. But coming back to the arrival of President Biden, as Abhishek pointed out, that this would be the third time that both leaders will be holding bilateral talks in 3 months. They met on the sidelines of G7 in Hiroshima, then in DC, and
Yes.
now in India. And straight after landing, President Biden is going to go to 7 LKM, where both leaders will meet. So also, usually, Shivani, you also know that whenever there is some state visit or official visit, these meetings are located or perhaps take place at Hyderabad House. This is perhaps for the first time that it is going to take place at 7 LKM. So there could be some sort of a messaging, or Prime Minister maybe trying to give a personal touch to these leaders, as it's a big moment for India, as India is hosting G20. So this bilateral meeting will take place at Prime Minister's official residence, 7 LKM, and it will start at around 8:20, between 8:20 to 8:30.
Yes.
And there could be discussion on a lot of areas. Less big ticket announcements. There would be more focus would be more on fast tracking the announcements which
That
were
have
made in
already
June,
been made.
and also
Absolutely.
to review some of the long standing projects on
Yes,
long-standing
absolutely.
projects. Back to you,
One
Shivani.
of those is, of course, nuclear reactors construction deal that has to be sealed. I do thank both Abhishek and Siddhant for joining us. Let me also go across to our guest joining us. Meera Shankar is former Indian ambassador to the US. Daniel S. Markey is author and senior research professor at Johns Hopkins University's School of Advanced International Studies. Professor Max Abrams, international security expert from Boston, is joining us, and also Professor Madhav Nalapad. Meera Shankar, I'm coming to you first up. Just the statements that have been made by the US administration, as I mentioned earlier, ahead of the arrival of the president in India, just goes on to show the kind of emphasis the US administration is putting in its relationship with India, which was also witnessed when the Prime Minister visited last.
Yes, I think the India-US strategic partnership has definitely intensified and acquired more substance as there is increasing strategic convergence between the two countries with regard to establishing a stable and sustainable balance in Asia, which is not under the dominance of any one country. Beyond this, of course, there are major interests which both countries have in each other: economic, technological, and in the area of scientific cooperation. So there's a whole big agenda which the two countries have, and it's a relationship which is becoming more substantive. This is reflected in the frequency of exchanges, and of course, the meeting between President Biden and Prime Minister Modi in Delhi will ensure that the momentum in the relationship, which was built up after the state visit of Prime Minister Modi to Washington, is sustained, and that many of the significant decisions which were taken there are followed up and implemented within a time frame. Because, we've seen this in the past, that there are big decisions and then, they tend to fall by the wayside if they are not pursued emphatically by both sides. So the GEF 414 engine, for instance, the joint venture to produce it in India with HAL, where is the agreement between HAL and GE? Yes, now there is US congressional approval for it, so that's a step forward. What is the time frame that GE has for establishing the factory? What is the time frame that HAL has
Right.
for completing the design of the aircraft? The drones, where the price negotiations were to be completed, the Reaper drones, which India wanted to buy. Then the whole critical and emerging technologies initiative, the first step with regard to investment in some aspects of semiconductors in India, but the broader question of creating an eco framework, or a framework for connecting business, universities, research institutions, in these high-tech areas of semiconductors,
All right.
artificial intelligence, 5G telecommunication and beyond, and space, as well as other areas.
And
So
there
there
are a
was
little bit, there are this people's, issues connected to the people's day-to-day lives as well that are on agenda. For example, review of consulates, progress in Ahmedabad and Bengaluru, the relaxation in visa norms that is to be reviewed, the push for fast tracking of, as you said, the GE jet engines deal, cooperation in semiconductor supply chains, enhancing commercial collaborations, and as I mentioned, nuclear reactors construction deal to be sealed as well. Max, I want to come to you. Just give me a sense of how important, the US establishment is looking at India to play the role that it needs, of course, in a fractured world, in a divided world, and for, a lot of that to be achieved during this G20 summit in the national capital.
The U.S. regards India as a critical strategic partner. There are obvious reasons for this. The United States is always looking for markets and for trade, and India has now overtaken China as the most populous country. Also, its growth rate demographically is rising, whereas other countries are falling. India is currently ranked as the 7th largest economy in the world. And again, the Indian economy is moving up, whereas other economies, including China's, seems to be struggling much more. By 2030, India is projected to have the 3rd largest economy up there.
Max, just interrupting you for a brief minute. President Joe Biden is now walking down the stairs of the Air Force One. The president is being received by VK Singh as a representative of the Indian government. But there are, of course, the US ambassador to India who's also there at the airport. You see, I think that's J.V. Shergill who's also there. No, that's somebody else. But VK Singh is obviously there as a representative of the Indian government, welcoming the US president to India. The US ambassador to India, the new one, who has obviously just started a few months ago, is also there at the airport. This is going to be a brief introductions and a few statements exchanged at the New Delhi airport before the president gets into what is referred to as the beast, his vehicle, and goes to 7 LKM for that bilateral with the Indian Prime Minister. The president also meeting a young girl there. They seem to know each other from before. And yes, so pleasantries being exchanged. The President of the United States has landed in the national capital. This is, of course, ahead of G20 summit. But there is a bilateral to look forward to that's happening just this evening in just about an hour's time from now. Yes, Max, sorry to interrupt you there. You can finish your thought.
Yes, so, the United States is really prioritizing this relationship for all sorts of reasons. Economically, yes, but of course, this relationship is happening in the shadow of growing American concerns that so-called unipolarity, post-Cold War, the condition where the United States was seen as the world's premier hegemonic power is obviously, contested and challenged. There's an obvious rise of China. We've been expecting this for a long time, but it really, over the past decade, has come to fruition. The United States views India as a bulwark against China. So for all of these reasons, economic, but also military, the U.S.-India relationship is extraordinarily important. I think it's interesting that Xi is not present at this summit. And I think that the Americans are going to try to exploit this and try to show not just India, but also the global South, the rest of the international community, that they should side more with the United States than with China. I think that Xi's omission from this summit is a very important aspect of it, and the United States is going to try to exploit it.
Yes. Well, it's not just Xi Jinping, the Chinese president, who's not going to be present. The Chinese premier is in town. But it's also, of course, Russian President Vladimir Putin, who's not coming for the G20 summit either. And precisely what Max has been talking about, there's this growing discomfort between the West Bloc and China and Russia together. We will talk about that in just a bit. But Daniel, I want to come to you with that question. In fact, the absence of Russia and Chinese president, is that going to take away too much from the G20 summit? Or do you feel that this is something that was expected, is on expected lines, and it shouldn't deter the rest of the countries to make the best out of this summit?
Obviously, the other countries have agendas that they'll want to advance, and to some extent, I don't think that the absence of either of these countries' leaders would necessarily preclude that. I do think we should separate the two. The absence of Putin was something that was widely anticipated. We all know that this was gearing up to be already a divisive summit as a consequence of Russia's aggression in Ukraine. And the differences of opinion over that. And Putin's position in all of that made his attendance very difficult, if not impossible. And so that was fully expected. But Xi's decision not to come, which has not been fully explained publicly to the world, and was not really previewed up until the last few days, is a surprise. I think it was at least in part intended to be a snub to India. Whether or not it will land that way is a different issue. And precisely why she has chosen not to come is also not entirely clear. It may have domestic or other reasons behind it, so we simply don't know at this point. It will, I think, make India's life in some ways a little bit easier because bridging the gap between the positions of Russia and China versus the so-called West and the global South, India will, have to have a little bit less of a bridging act to play. But we should remember that the Chinese delegation will be there, even if she won't be there.
Yes.
The rest will be there, and they can still try to obstruct progress, particularly on the Ukraine issue, on a joint statement, and a variety of other things. So it doesn't eliminate the challenge, but some of the photographs were bound to be uncomfortable had she been there, and some of that will be made a bit easier.
In fact, on the joint statement, I want to go across to Madhav, Professor Madhav as well. That's the one big thing that everybody is watching out for. It's expected on Sunday at the end of the summit meet, but it could be in doldrums. It is in doubt, given that we've not had that statement being agreed upon by all nations. The Ukraine-Russia war is casting a very wide shadow on any kind of a joint statement. Do you believe that any kind of a New Delhi statement is possible at all?
Look, I'd like to say very clearly that we have to look at it from the point of view of how democracies look at things. As far as India and the United States are concerned, long before there were close government-to-government relations, there were close people-to-people relations. And there's a very vibrant Indian-American community that has contributed a lot to that. There are tens of millions of people in India who have extensive linkages to the United States. So it's a relationship that has grown from the ground up. It's not been imposed from the top down. President Biden sent one of his closest personal friends, Ambassador Garcetti, as the envoy to India. He did that because Ambassador Garcetti has a direct line to President Biden. And he did that as a mark of his understanding that India is a critical partner in the Indo-Pacific. We're talking about defense. The reality is that U.S. defense companies will need to base a lot of their plans and production in India if they are to compete in the global market with what is likely to be a coming together of Russian and Chinese defense technologies. So that is a very, very important aspect in which both sides will benefit. Technology. You look at all the major technology centers in the United States. I've gone to some of them. And believe me, sometimes I believe I'm back in India. You hardly see anyone who is not ethnically Indian. Of course, they're all American, but they're all ethnically Indian. So the reality is these two democracies are finally coming together at the top. And may I say that as soon as the Prime Minister Modi came, all the four agreements that basically are the foundation for India-US defense and security cooperation were signed under Prime Minister Modi. India has joined the Quad. And let's not kid ourselves. When we are talking about a free, open, and inclusive Indo-Pacific, it means we are protecting the Indo-Pacific from powers that don't want a free, open, and inclusive Indo-Pacific.
Okay.
So from all points of view, the two biggest democracies coming together, the leaders of the two having a nice dinner at basically at the home of the
Prime
Indian
Minister.
Prime Minister, whereas
Yes.
previously it was the home of the US President. I think it's very meaningful, not just for in terms of a statement. This is a statement. And in my view, as a common citizen, not as a experienced, if I may say so, civil servant or bureaucrat, I'd like to say that for me, this is what counts.
Okay, all right. Well, there's a lot of business that is done on the sidelines of a summit like this. Yes, it is about diplomacy, it is about that statement, it is about bridging some of the divides in the world and showcasing your heft as a host, which India is doing. But on the sidelines, a lot of business takes place. I request our guest to stay with us. Here's a conversation with the US-India Business Council President Atul Keshup on the G20 summit that I had earlier and what it means for India and the partnerships on the business front. Listen in. The G20 with India as the president, Mr. Keshup, you know it's a big occasion for us. President Biden is coming. Leaders from across the world, global community are coming. How do you see this moment for India?
Shivani, thank you for having me. Look, this is India's golden moment. India will shine on the world stage. The leaders of the top 20 economies will come here. President Biden is coming here. India's had a magnificent, magical moment with the Chandrayaan-3 landing on the south pole of the moon.
Yes.
An incredibly difficult feat to achieve, a victory for all of India and all of humanity. What ISRO has done, I think, kind of hammers the ball out of the park on the notion that India's moment has come, and that this is a golden time for Indians to aspire for the greatest amount of national economic growth and happiness and prosperity and development as India rises to become a much, much bigger economy and to help set the standards and the rules for the world of the 21st century.
The G20, of course, focuses a lot on the politics, diplomacy, because a lot of the global leaders will be there on the same forum. But a lot of the work actually gets done behind the scenes, things like you do. So give me a sense of business-wise, trade, investment, collaboration-wise, what is it that you're focusing on while being in the national capital?
So that's a great question. Look, I represent a business council of over 200 world-class companies, American and Indian. And if you look at, for instance, the joint statement set by President Biden and Prime Minister Modi after the state visit, there are 58 paragraphs in there. And these paragraphs reflect the very bold aspirations of the two governments for where they see U.S. and Indian collaboration in kind of ensuring the happiness, freedom, and prosperity of our people and of the entire world. But in a lot of that, business plays a really key role in defense, in pharmaceuticals and life sciences, in future tech and deep tech, quantum computing, artificial intelligence, in cybersecurity, in space exploration. Our companies increasingly are collaborating in many ways that will help define how much government can achieve. So my job as the head of a trade association is to try to find ways that we can smooth out the path of U.S.-India business-to-business collaboration in a way that we can help the governments achieve these very, very bold goals. Because if India and America succeed, it's going to be good for the entire planet.
Yes, and we remember when the Prime Minister was in US on that trip, which has really shifted the Indo-US ties to a new level. A lot of the focus was on business. You had business leaders around the two world leaders, and of course, all of that needs to be taken forward. You spoke about the Chandrayaan. Space tech is growing. Is there anything we can expect or look forward to as far as companies or collaborations are concerned in this field?
So you have seen how there has been an enormous growth in private sector space explorations, near Earth, remote sensing, and so many other applications besides in the United States since we deregulated the space sector. And so you've got companies that are launching rockets, they're supplying the space station, they're putting astronauts up. And I think that that kind of growth is really unlocking the potential of space.
Well, why is the world looking at India when it comes to strengthening their business ties? That's because India's the fastest growing emerging economy in the world. And really, the only single bright spot, if we can say, is for such a large country around the world economically. Let's also take a look at what the World Bank has said as far as India's growth is concerned in the last few years. So the World Bank's G20 document says that India has achieved financial inclusion in record time. They've talked about how in 6 years alone, the financial inclusion has been taken to a level of 80%. Of course, this is something we've discussed very much in domestic politics. In 2022, the value of the UPI transactions became nearly 50% of India's nominal GDP. Without digital infrastructure, this would have taken 47 years to reach the current stage. The Indian digital payment infrastructure includes, of course, the landmark schemes of the Prime Minister like Jan Dhan bank accounts, Aadhaar, of course, mobile phones, the fact that internet is the cheapest anywhere in the world in India. The cost of onboarding customers has decreased from $23 to just $0.1 because of the digital payment infrastructure mechanisms. Also in March 2022, the World Bank report talks about how India's savings were at $33 billion, equivalent to nearly 1.14 of the GDP. And these are words that have not just come from the World Bank. Not so long ago, the IMF had also lauded India's advancements in the digital infrastructure field and more. In fact, the IMF chief lauded India's leadership ahead of the G20 summit, saying that the country has set a high bar for global leadership and that India's presidency is helping the fragmented world. She also couldn't help herself from participating in an Odia folk dance upon her arrival. Here are those visuals. Madhav, I want to come to you once again on, the soft power that India is displaying as far as this G20 summit is concerned. They've really taken it to the public in the run-up to the New Delhi Heads of State meeting to over 200 cities. They're showcasing India's roots, Vasudev Kutumbakam, plus the large Nataraj statue. You've got folk dances taking place, Indian music, Indian architecture, Indian history on display. Your thoughts on how the government has handled and presented this G20 presidency?
Look, the first point is that in India, for a long time, an international meeting was basically Delhi, perhaps Mumbai, okay, Bangalore as well, possibly, but that's about it. Maybe at most half a dozen cities. Today, we are talking about 50 to 60 cities, and we are talking especially even in small towns. And I have long said that the future of India, the future of technology in India is going to be in the small towns because the quality of life is so much better in a small town and techies will be drawn there. So the fact is that this is a whole of India approach. It's not just the metro India, it's a whole of India approach. And may I point out one important point which India is raising, which the Prime Minister has been talking about, and that is a global kind of a framework for crypto. The reality is crypto is something that you can't avoid. I mean, there are some central banks and central bankers who basically are happy about it and who would like to ban it or block it. It can't be blocked. In fact, you should use blockchain and make it transparent. The Prime Minister is instead saying you have to have global norms and you have to have it transparent so that people can understand what is happening in the world of crypto.
Okay.
That dark web and criminal gangs, mafiosi, terrorists do not use cryptocurrency the way they use cash currency. So that is a very important point that India is making, and I do hope that the other G20 members will sign on to a global kind of a framework
for cryptocurrency. Okay.
Does not go into the dark actions of terrorists and others.
Daniel, I want to take your thoughts as well as a foreign observer. What do you make of the message that India is trying to send of its, large history, culture, the message of one earth, one family, one future? On climate issues, for example, the Prime Minister has led from the front. India is leading the charge despite being a developing country on meeting climate goals. The Prime Minister recently spoke to moneycontrol.com, which is our sister concern, highlighting those on how India wants to do more. He recently also talked about how these goals have to be met, they have to be increased. that is the legacy that the G20 summit or the government wants to leave with this G20 summit, exposing more of India's culture, civilization to the world and what it stands for.
Yeah, I'd say India is doing a very good job of presenting itself as an attractive partner to a wide range of other countries, certainly including the United States. And I think that this is urgent as a sort of a strategic agenda for India. This isn't just a matter of nice to have, a friendly face to the world. This is a critical opportunity that India actually not just would be good to seize, but needs to seize in order to see an expansion of employment for its many young people and to see it achieve the kind of economic growth and development that is really necessary for India to assume the position that it would like to assume on the world stage as not just a leading power, but one of the very most powerful countries in the world. If India doesn't seize this moment and do so in a way that attracts foreign capital and all kinds of investment and all kinds of new business arrangements, then it'll be a big missed opportunity. And that would be problematic for India. So it's not just a matter of this is India's moment and India is coming out to the world, but India needs to do this for its own purposes. And so far, so good. In a number of different ways, but the proof will be in the eating over the next coming years. This isn't just one big splashy event and you're done.
No, absolutely. In fact, the Prime Minister recently has reiterated a couple of messages, which is that this is the moment for India to seize. This presidency is happening for us at the right time so that we can showcase our strengths and what we stand for. But of course, the next 25 years, as the government calls Amrit Kal, till 2047, when we are hoping to become a developed country, if we don't seize the moment now, then it will be a missed opportunity, as you said. I request our guests to stay with us. Let's also take a quick look at just what is on showcase. Now, that Bharat Mandapam that has been created by India is already wowing not just local residents or Indians, but the foreign dignitaries. Here's none other than the G20 India Chief Coordinator, Harsh Shringla, giving you a tour of the delegates' offices as well. Take a look.